Benvinguts and welcome back to a new knighthood. We've explored the origins of chivalry, how this tradition emerged from the chaos after Rome's fall, and we've seen how Geoffrey de Charny embodied these ideals in northern France. Today, we turn to a concept that's harder to translate, harder to explain, but essential to understanding medieval knighthood at its height. This is Paratge, a code of earned character in Occitan and Catalan lands. Not bloodline, not wealth. Character demonstrated through conduct day after day. For about a century and a half, this ideal shaped one of the most sophisticated expressions of medieval culture in Western Europe. Then it faced devastating disruption. Paratge. In the 13th century, the political and social structures that sustained this ideal were shattered, fundamentally transforming what made this culture distinctive. But for about a century and a half, roughly 1100 to the 1220s, when the Albigensian Crusade began transforming the political landscape, Paratge represented medieval culture at its most refined. From Poitiers to the Mediterranean, from the Pyrenees to Provence, the people who spoke the Languedoc lived by this code. Paratge resists easy translation. Literally, it means something like peerage, sharing the same social standing. But it meant far more than that. Not simply honor, not merely nobility. Paratge was the full measure of a person's moral worth, the quality of their character, the excellence of their conduct. And crucially, it could not be inherited. Across the Pyrenees and Catalunya, similar values developed, influenced by these connections but shaped by its own circumstances. Catalan and Occitan are sister languages, both descended from Latin, both part of the Occitano-Romance language family, closely related during this period. The linguistic kinship facilitated cultural exchange. Though Catalunya was developing its own distinct identity, there were significant overlaps in ideals. These regions shared connections through language family, marriage alliances, shared poetry, and common values. Before we examine the violence and upheaval that transformed this region, and we will in a future episode, let us understand what it was at its height. What was Paratge? We've seen how knighthood emerged with its own set of virtues. The Occitan tradition shared these foundations, but expressed them through its own distinctive framework. At the heart of Paratge were the following essential qualities. Largueza, generosity. Not mere gift-giving. This was abundance of spirit, openness of hand, willingness to share without calculation. A lord who hoarded wealth was no lord at all, regardless of his title. Mezura, wisdom and moderation. The ability to judge rightly and act appropriately. This wasn't weakness. It was knowing when to be fierce and when to be gentle, when to speak and when to remain silent. It required deep self-knowledge and psychological flexibility. Cortesia, courtesy to all regardless of station. This courtesy was owed to peasants, merchants, even enemies. Your conduct towards those beneath you revealed your Paratge more clearly than your conduct toward equals. Leialtat, loyalty. Loyalty to your word, to those under your protection, to your principles, even when it cost you everything. Pretz, earned worth and reputation. Your Pretz was built through embodying these other qualities. Woven through all of this was tolerance, the willingness to live alongside those of different faiths and traditions, to recognize that wisdom could emerge from any source. Jewish scholars, Muslim merchants, Christian philosophers, they mingled in Occitan courts in ways that would have been unthinkable in Paris or London. Crucially, Paratge meant defense of your community and its values. This wasn't abstract. It meant standing for shared traditions, protecting your people, and preserving the autonomy to live according to your own customs. When the Albigensian Crusade threatened to destroy this world in the 13th century, Paratge became a rallying cry, a way of naming what made Occitan culture worth defending even unto death. But here's the crucial point. A peasant who embodied these qualities possessed more Paratge than a nobleman who lacked them. Notice something here. They describe someone who can shift between modes of being: generous, fierce, wise, steadfast. This is what we saw Geoffrey de Charny demanding: the ability to be humble among friends, proud and bold against foes, tender and merciful towards those who need assistance. Paratge was a southern version, but with a crucial difference. It was explicitly available to anyone who could achieve it. The troubadours were the voice of this culture. They were performers, poets, musicians who travelled from court to court. And they were remarkably diverse. Bernard de Ventadon was the son of a castle baker. Père Vidal was a furrier's son. Women composed as well: the Countess of Dia and Azalea de Paratge. Their poetry spread throughout Europe. In Catalunya, troubadours performed in Occitan, the language of troubadour poetry, even though many Catalan nobles understood it as a closely related variant. This created a shared literary culture that transcended the Pyrenees. Bernard de Ventadon wrote, "Chantar no pot gare valer, si dins dal cor no mulo chants." Singing is worth nothing if the song does not move from within the heart. This is not courtly artifice. This is a demand for authenticity. Your words must reflect your true feeling or they are worthless. This is Paratge applied to poetry. Form must be matched by genuine substance. The troubadours created the first European vernacular literature of sophistication. Before them, serious literature meant Latin. They proved that the tongues people actually spoke could express complex ideas and refined aesthetics. This was revolutionary. We'll return to the troubadours in future episodes. Their influence spread far beyond Occitania, and their tradition would survive even after the political structures that nurtured it were destroyed. The position of women in this culture deserves careful examination. This was still a patriarchal medieval society, let's be clear about that. But certain legal and cultural patterns distinguished it from northern France. In specific circumstances, women could inherit fiefs and exercise authority. Ermengard of Narbonne ruled from 1134 to 1192. She inherited at age 5 when her father died at the Battle of Fraga. Though married twice for political reasons, she governed independently, and her husband played no role in ruling Narbonne. She patronized troubadours including Paratge, Giraud de Cornell, and Azalea de Paratge. When disputes arose in southern France, parties sought her arbitration. The most notable example in the Catalan sphere was Petronila of Aragon, who inherited the kingdom in 1137 and whose marriage to Ramon Berenguer IV of Barcelona created the crown of Aragon. Women were active agents also in the writing of poetry. Beatritz, the Countess of Dia, wrote, "Estad ahí un greu coserier per un cavalier caiogut." I have been in great distress over a night I have had. She's expressing desire and disappointment with directness. The troubadour tradition, at least in theory, allowed for this kind of female voice, though we should note that most troubadours were still men and the courts were still dominated by male power. The intellectual culture was equally distinctive. In Catalunya, the monastery of Ripoll had one of the great libraries of medieval Europe. Under Abbot Oliba, the scriptorium produced translations of Arabic works on mathematics and astronomy. When Gerbert of Aurillac, later Pope Sylvester II, wanted to study advanced mathematics, he came to Catalunya in 967 to 970 because the knowledge was available there through Arabic sources. In Narbonne and other Occitan cities, Jewish scholars like Abraham ibn Ezra worked on Hebrew grammar and biblical commentary. In Catalunya, Girona developed into one of medieval Europe's most important centers of Jewish learning, producing major works of Talmudic commentary and later Kabbalah. The relatively tolerant atmosphere in both regions allowed intellectual exchange between traditions. Let's step into an Occitan court at its height. Toulouse, 1190. The court gathers. Present are nobles, but also wealthy merchants, troubadours regardless of birth, visiting scholars. This mixing would be unusual in Paris or London. A troubadour performs a new Canso, a song of courtly love praising his lady. The audience listens critically. They know the technical requirements, and they will judge whether this is genuinely skillful work. Later there might be a tenso, a poetic debate between two troubadours. Should a knight serve a married lady? Can true love exist without suffering? The debate follows strict rules, but the content is sophisticated psychological analysis. Political matters are discussed. A dispute needs resolution. The count's judgment must demonstrate Mezura, wisdom and fairness. His reputation depends not on force, but on the respect his decisions command. Throughout, conduct is governed by Cortesia. Interrupting a speaker breaches honor. Even heated disagreements must be conducted with grace. This is not softness. These are men who fight wars, who know violence intimately. But the ideal is that violence should be contained, channeled, used only when necessary. In Catalunya, courts operated similarly. When Jaume I wrote his chronicle, the Llibre dels Fets, Book of Deeds, decades later, he described court life with the same values: keeping your word, showing courtesy, demonstrating wisdom, and being generous. The Catalan dimension is often overlooked, but it's essential to understanding the story. The Counts of Barcelona held lands on both sides of the Pyrenees. They married Occitan noblewomen. They patronized the same troubadours who performed in Paratge, Toulouse and Narbonne. Ramon Berenguer IV, who united Catalunya and Aragon, was literally raised in the Occitan tradition. His mother was Douce, Countess of Provence, an important Occitan noblewoman who brought the county of Provence into the Barcelona dynasty when she married his father in 1112. Ramon Berenguer grew up speaking Occitan with his mother, inheriting Provençal lands, immersed in troubadour culture from birth. His court in Barcelona was influenced by the Provençal tradition he'd inherited from his mother. The language was different. Catalan was developing its own identity, but the connections were real. Similar emphasis on courtesy, on patronage of learning, on ideals of earned honor. When we look at the landscape here in Catalunya today, we see the evidence of these connections. The Romanesque churches, the castle architecture. There are similarities across the Pyrenees that reflect these medieval relationships. The mountains were a landscape feature, but trade, marriage, and cultural exchange crossed them regularly. This matters because when the Albigensian Crusade devastated the Occitan courts and nobility, who had long operated with considerable autonomy, which we'll examine in a future episode, these early connections left traces in Catalunya even as it developed its own distinct identity. The influence of these shared values continued to shape aspects of Catalan culture, though Catalunya was never simply an extension of Occitania. Paratge in its true form may have been Occitan, but echoes of these ideals, the emphasis on earned honor, on courtesy across social ranks, can be traced in the development of Catalan culture. Paratge gives us a window into a different way of organizing society. Not perfect, this was still a medieval world with violence and inequality, but different. The idea that your character defines you more than your bloodline, that loyalty to your principles and to those under your care matters more than expediency. These are not medieval ideas, these are human ideas. It's easy to be generous when it costs nothing. Easy to be courteous to those who can help you. Easy to be loyal when loyalty serves your interests. Paratge demanded these qualities when they were difficult. when maintaining them required sacrifice. The troubadours, the courts, the intellectual culture, these were expressions of people trying to live by a demanding code. They didn't always succeed, but the attempt created something worth studying. In future episodes, we'll examine what happened when this culture faced the Albigensian Crusade. We'll look at Muret, at Montségur. We'll explore how these connections influenced the region's later development. The Occitan world believed excellence through character was possible. They tried, and for a century and a half they created something distinctive. Whether that was wisdom or naivety, that's for us to decide. But the questions they asked are still our questions. How do we become who we're meant to be? How do we cultivate excellence? How do we remain true to our principles when tested? Paratge wasn't theory, it was practice, action, visible in how you treated people, especially those beneath you in status. So examine your own conduct for a couple of weeks. Choose someone you interact with who has less power, status, or influence than you. Maybe it's someone who works for you. Maybe it's service staff. Maybe it's someone asking for help. Maybe it's your own children. Watch how you treat them when no one else is watching. Are you showing genuine cortesia, courtesy that cost you something, that recognizes their worth? Or are you dismissive, impatient, extractive? Your conduct toward those who can't benefit you reveals your character. That's what Paratge demanded. If you find yourself falling short, don't just feel bad about it. Change how you act. Apologize if necessary. Then do it differently. Character isn't what you believe about yourself. It's what you do, especially when it's difficult. This isn't about being nice. It's about being excellent. And excellence requires that you can be fierce when fierceness is needed, generous when generosity costs you something, wise in your judgments, and steadfast in your commitments. That's the psychological flexibility Paratge demanded. That's what we're cultivating. If this exploration interests you, subscribe for more. Leave your thoughts in the comments on what you discovered about your own conduct and what you changed. Thank you for watching.